It has more vineyards and wineries than anywhere else in Georgia, but I'm guessing you haven't heard of Gurjaani. When most people think of Georgia's Kakheti wine region, they think of Tel Aviv or Signagi. Gurjaani is the area right in between these two more popular destinations, and it's a bit of an alternative spot in Kakheti. As well as vineyards, cellars, and wine experiences, there are plenty of non-wine things to do here as well. And these range from mosaics, monuments and architecture from the Soviet period, to quirky house museums, important monasteries, and even mud baths. This guide will cover the small city of Gurjaani, as well as other villages in the municipality. A reminder that I have a blog post with a full travel guide that I'll be updating regularly, and a free map that you can use to navigate Gurjaani. Those are linked in the description below. I'd like to give a special thanks to Visit Gurjaani and the City Hall of Gurjaani municipality who helped us to coordinate our visit. When I was planning this trip, I got in touch with Katie at Visit Gurjaani. She helped to piece together an itinerary, contact these businesses, and she also gave us a driver, Bidzina, who took us around to some of these locations. Katie and her colleague Lika accompanied us for a lot of this trip and were absolutely fantastic in guiding us and giving little hints and tips along the way. Gurjaani is located around 2 hours east of Tbilisi via the Kakheti highway. To get there from Tbilisi, you can take a marshrutka van from Ortachala bus station or a shared taxi from the Isani metro station. However, I do recommend hiring a car for this part of Kakheti if you can. The attractions are quite spread out, and it's really nice to have your own transportation so that you don't have to rely on buses and taxis. For this trip, we hired a car through Local Rent, which is the website I always use in Georgia. We ended up picking up our car from the East Point shopping centre, which was really handy because we could get straight on the highway out to Gurjaani. Because Gurjaani is relatively close to Tbilisi, you can also visit as a day trip. The most convenient option in this case would be to book a private driver, and I would recommend using the GoTrip website to do that. We visited Gurjaani in the first week of April, and spring is generally a really nice time of year to spend time in Kakheti because it's not too hot and it's not too crowded. There are also some special things to do in Kakheti in spring. You can see winemakers opening their qvevri to taste the new wines. And one thing that Gurjaani is really famous for, that I'm going to explore a bit more later, which is these blossoming peach trees. However, I think the best time of year to visit Gurjaani would be in autumn. The Gurjaani Wine Festival, which is the biggest wine festival in Georgia, is held here in the middle of October. Autumn is also the harvest season, so you can observe people picking grapes and making wine. And it's a really nice time of year with a festive atmosphere to travel in Kakheti. There are plenty of accommodation options in Gurjaani for different interests and different budgets. We stayed at 2 hotels during our visit. The first one is Horizons, which is a brand new cabin-style accommodation in the village of Kakheti. It's really modern with these self-contained cabins. Each one has an ensuite and a little kitchenette. The views of the Greater Caucasus Mountains across the river valley are really spectacular, and the property has a beautiful pool and this cool barrel sauna. They have an on-site restaurant and the food here was really fantastic. A big thank you to Leah for cooking some really beautiful meals for us. And they also do cooking masterclasses and other activities. We also stayed for one night at the Vasisubani estate, which is a typical wine chateau in Kakheti. This place is more established, it's very, very beautiful. The hotel rooms are located inside a restored palace from the 19th century. And then the other buildings on the property are more modern. There is a restaurant, a wine cellar, and again, another beautiful pool with a view of the mountains. You can find more recommendations in my blog post linked below. Gurjaani itself is technically a town. It's home to around 8,000 people. Although the history of the town goes back to at least the 16th century, Gurjaani is quite a young city in the sense that it was mainly built up during the Soviet period. The majority of the architecture and the infrastructure that you see in the city dates to the 1930s and the 1940s. When Georgia was part of the Soviet Union, there were a number of factories built in Gurjaani for wine, canning, and brick making, and the town was sort of built up to house the workers from these factories and their families. You'll see these identical 4-story apartment blocks everywhere. There's also schools, a library, and other services, including one of the most impressive culture houses that I've ever seen. It's definitely worth taking the time to have a walk around Gurjaani town, and there are several points of interest you can see. Your first stop should be the Gurjaani train station, which was built much earlier in 1915 as part of the Kakheti railway. There are no more passenger trains in Kakheti, however, there are still freight services that pass through this station. Behind the railway station, there are these 2 really excellent pieces of Kakheti-inspired street art. They were both painted in 2024 as part of the Tbilisi Mural Fest. On the corner near the railway station is the Gurjaani Library. We were very curious about the architecture of this building, so we went inside for a look, and one of the staff members very kindly showed us around, showed us the different reading rooms and archives. It's a really nice building and a really important part of the community. I then recommend walking up Noneshvili Street. There are a number of interesting pieces of architecture on this street, including the music school, which is currently being restored and has this interesting metalwork decoration on the facade. When you reach the top of the street, there's a small park and one of several wall memorials in Gurjaani. There's also Papa's Bagi, or the grandfather garden, with this very interesting sculpture at the entrance. The Palace of Culture backs onto the park and you can access it from inside the park. It's still used today as a cultural centre, and as we were walking around the building, we saw people coming and going, so we decided to pop inside for a look. There are several theatres inside the building, including a puppet theatre, but we just stuck to the stairwells. There are really impressive canvases and original parquet floors and some very interesting details. Gurjaani's main church, the Holy Trinity Church, was constructed in 2012. But keeping with the Soviet theme, there's a very interesting old museum building next door with these beautiful relief sculptures. The final stop on our little Gurjaani walking tour was the local bazaar. And this is quite a modern market with produce and a butcher's out the back. People here were really friendly and wanted their photo taken. It was really nice just to have a quick walk and to see what produce was on offer. This being Kakheti, you're definitely going to want to do a few wine-related activities in Gurjaani. As I mentioned, there are more vineyards here than any other municipality in Kakheti, so you have lots of choice when it comes to cellars and vineyards to visit. Gurjaani has 6 PDOs, or Protected Designation of Origin, and winemakers here grow a variety of grapes including Rikatsiteli, Saperavi, qvevri, and other lesser-known varieties. We did a fantastic wine degustation at Kardinaki 1888, otherwise known as Ampello, and this is a winery, a restaurant, and a resort hotel located in Kardinaki. The company has 16 hectares of vineyards and a really beautiful cellar that's decorated with murals. The restaurant upstairs overlooks the vineyards and has an exceptional view. Not only does Gurjaani have more vineyards than anywhere else in Georgia, it's also home to the single biggest wine producing facility in the country. Now known as Bolero, this factory was established in 1929 when Georgia was part of the Soviet Union. The factory is located on the outskirts of Gurjaani town and it's absolutely huge. It's so big, in fact, that it has its own railway station. When it was first set up, the winery was known as the Red Cellar, and our tour of Bolero started in this original Marani, the first part of the complex, and all the qvevri that you can see buried in the ground here were actually confiscated from winemakers around Georgia and brought to this facility as part of the process of collectivizing winemaking. We also did a tour of the underground spirit reserve, where Bolero keeps more than 40,000 barrels full of brandy, cognac, and cha-cha. This was definitely the most interesting wine tour I think I've done anywhere in Georgia, just because of the history of the place and the different relics from the Soviet period that are around the grounds. Bolero is actually closed to the public at the moment, so I'm very grateful to visit Gurjaani, who helped to coordinate my tour. Staff did tell us that they're planning to open a museum on the grounds, so hopefully the gates will be open to visitors soon. On previous visits to Gurjaani, I've also been to a number of small cellars in the area. One of my favourites is Vakho Okruashvili. This is in Velistike, and it's a really nice, smaller, family-owned winery. There are countless monasteries and churches in Gurjaani. We visited 3 that we really enjoyed and that I would recommend you prioritise. The first one is Gurjaani Kvelatsminda. This is a really well-known church, not only in Kakheti, but across Georgia. It dates back to the 8th to 9th centuries and is really important because it's the only example of a church in Georgia that has this double dome design. We actually came to this church on our very first trip to Georgia back in 2017. But because we didn't have a guide and we hadn't really done our research, we didn't understand the significance of the church. It was really nice to come back with Katie and have her explain a bit about the history. She told us that in the 17th century, when Georgia was under siege from Shah Abbas, one of the most important icons in the country, called the Mother Iveria, was actually brought to this church for safekeeping. Today, this is an active monastery. There is a small community of monks living in a building nearby. They have a wine cellar and they sell honey and other items at a small shop at the entrance to the church. The location in the forest is really beautiful, especially in spring. It's a little bit of a walk to get down to the church from the parking area, but it's really, really beautiful. The second Orthodox site that we visited is called Gurjaani Monastery. It's a bit younger, built during the 10th to 11th centuries, and it's about 6 kilometers away from Kvelatsminda by road. The two are on the same side of the valley, and it's pretty incredible that they are linked by an underground tunnel that goes through the mountains. Gurjaani is a larger complex with an upper men's monastery, and also sort of incorporated into this are the ruins of a castle. A bit further down the hill, there's a convent where there is a small community of nuns. And just like at Bodbe near Signagi, they keep a really beautiful garden, and in spring they were growing these lovely tulips. The final church we visited is called the Cathedral of the Assumption of Virgin Mary, and it's located in Vasisubani village, a little further along the valley. This one dates to the 6th century, and it wasn't really on our radar. We kind of stopped off by accident just to have a look. It's really, really beautiful and definitely worth the little detour. The church is hidden away in the village, but it's pretty big. It's a 3-nave basilica constructed from cobblestones, and it has this beautiful long cloister on the bottom story. As with all churches in Georgia, women are required to cover their hair before they enter inside. This one also requires you to wear a skirt rather than pants. So at the front door, you'll see these wraparound skirts that you can borrow to tie around your waist. Men should also dress conservatively with covered shoulders and knees and an uncovered head. Now, if you are interested in Soviet architecture and urbexing, then I would definitely recommend going down to Vasisubani, which is a village still in Gurjaani municipality, but about 20 minutes from the town. In Vasisubani, right on the highway, they have an amazing culture house that was built in the 1950s. We weren't sure if it would be open or closed or abandoned. We were quite surprised to find the doors were open when we arrived, and there were about half a dozen women working inside. They were super friendly and they gave us a tour of the entire complex. They turned on the lights so that we could see the main hall with its curtains and red velvet seats. It's in really good condition, even though I don't think the main theatre is used anymore. Upstairs there are rehearsal rooms that they use for children's dance classes and things like that. Hanging in the entrance of the culture house is a photo of a very famous Gurjaani resident, and we'll tell you a bit more about her later. If you've ever driven through Gurjaani on your way to or from Tel Aviv, then no doubt you would have noticed this beautiful mosaic. It's located right in the center of town near the park. The mosaic was created in 1985 by the artists Leonardo Shengelia and Enrico Copadze, and in the past it decorated the Gurjaani bus station. This is a really interesting mosaic with lots of different scenes, including different stages of the wine harvest and winemaking, and folk music and dance. The ends of the panel are finished with these more modern mosaics. On one end, you can see cars and mechanical motifs, and this is where the Gurjaani bus station and taxi stand is still located today. On the other end, there's a mosaic that shows cosmonauts, and it's quite stunning, but unfortunately it's now obscured by this building that's been constructed right next to it. A little further up the highway from the mosaic is what is probably Gurjaani's most recognizable landmark, and that is the Memorial of Glory. This is a World War II monument with several components, and it extends all the way from the highway up to the top of the hill. It starts with these 5 massive stone piers that are modelled off Svanetian tower houses. You can walk up the stairs between the piers, and at the top there is a curved wall called the Wall of Eternity. It's a yellow tough stone sculpture with different reliefs that depict military images and also traditional Georgian symbols. Behind the wall, there's an amphitheatre and an eternal flame. The little building here houses the Glorious Memorial Museum. I've stopped here a few times in the past and always found the museum was closed. Luckily, on this visit, we ran into staff who were just coming to open up for the morning, and we got to go inside. This is a really interesting little museum. Inside they have a collection of paintings that all reference different war-related themes. They also have a nice collection of archival photos, different documents, some of them with Stalin's letterhead and signature. And they have soldiers' medals, letters. And Nana, who was working at the museum that morning, showed us these photos, which are stills from a film called Father of a Soldier. This was a Soviet-Georgian war film made in 1964. The main character of this movie, Georgi, is the inspiration behind the final part of the War Memorial Complex, which is a 20-meter tall, 80-ton sculpture created by the artist Merab Berdzinishvili. The memorial complex is open 24/7 and it's free, but the museum welcomes guests from Tuesday to Sunday from 10 a.m. till 6 p.m. A ticket costs just 3 lari. Another curious thing about Gurjaani that I stumbled on in my research is that there is a dormant volcano in the center of the town. You can see it from the War Memorial. If you look across the highway, there's a big green area with a grey patch in the middle. We went over for a closer look, and although it's fenced off, you can still look inside and see the volcanic crater with grey mud oozing out of it. This area is known as Akhtala Resort, and it's been used since at least the 18th century as a balneological resort. Apparently the mud is good for arthritis and certain lymphatic conditions. In 1920, there was a treatment centre and a sanatorium hotel built here. These buildings are still standing today, though at the time of our visit they were actually undergoing renovation, so we weren't able to do a mud treatment in Gurjaani. It's definitely something I would like to try and come back for sometime. You can walk all around Akhtala Park, see the volcanic crater, look at the interesting architecture and sculptures, and the park itself is also very beautiful. This is the venue for the Gurjaani Wine Festival, which happens in October. We came back for the wine festival. This is the largest wine festival in Georgia with more than 400 participants, including winemakers and other artisans, and a crowd of about 30,000 people. Along with a showcase of wine, there is a great food market, a big stage for live music, and special events for adults and kids throughout the day. Outside Gurjaani town in the village of Chandari, we visited the Varshnadze House Museum. This is one of the oldest parts of the municipality and it has some really beautiful architecture. This house in particular stands out because of its beautiful wooden balconies. Varshnadze was a Georgian Soviet film star and she lived here when she was a girl. She was born in 1904 and the history of the house goes back a little bit further than that. It was built by her father's family. The house has been converted into a museum. So the main part of the house has period furniture and decorations. It's very similar to the Chavchavadze House Museum at Sinandali. The second building has an exhibition about Natu's film career, so you can find photos and these old Soviet film posters. Kvelatsminda is another historic village in Gurjaani municipality. Here we visited the Numisi Cellar Museum. This is a really interesting little winery museum with a huge collection of antiques and precious objects. Our host, Nunu, has a vast collection of things that she has accumulated over the years, and she's beautifully arranged everything around her garden and inside this underground cellar. She put in a huge amount of effort to restore this house, which dates back to the 16th century. There's even an underground ice freezer that she discovered. It's really fun to do a little tour here. Nunu has all different sorts of things scattered around the house, including these Soviet-era metal signboards. At the end of a tour, you can sit down with Nunu and taste her delicious wine and cha-cha. She's quite a character and has a lot of stories to share. If you're visiting Gurjaani in spring like we did, then you'll definitely want to find some of these beautiful peach orchards. You can find peach trees around Chumlaki and in Yitaani. Obviously these peach orchards are private property, but there are several that allow visitors to come and take photographs when the trees are in bloom. We visited one called Agrubani. It was a bit cloudy and grey when we visited. Still, the flowers are very beautiful. But when there's a clear sky, you can see a beautiful backdrop of the Greater Caucasus Mountains with the peach blossoms in the foreground. There's a very short window of time in which you can see the trees in bloom. Most years they blossom at the end of March and remain in flower until around the 10th of April. We visited a few days after that and there were only a couple of trees that were still flowering. Gurjaani has a great food scene. It's a bit of an up-and-coming foodie hotspot, I think, because the Caucasus University Academy of Gastronomy, which is done in collaboration with the Basque Culinary Centre in Spain, is going to open in the centre of Gurjaani. You'll definitely want to eat some classic Kakhetian dishes when you're in Gurjaani. In spring, you can try chakapuli, which is the meat stew done with tarragon, green plum, and white wine. There's also mitzvadi, the classic barbecue, which is often done on vine branches. Then there's bozbashi, a beef soup, and kinkali dumplings as well. We had some really terrific meals on this trip at Ampello after our wine tasting, and we also ate at a place called Garden Tvisi, which is in Gurjaani town. There are lots of other restaurants you can try. Another popular one is Velistike Veranda, and just outside Gurjaani is Dergi, which is quite a famous restaurant run by Chef Leban Kobiashvili. Like many people, I've driven through Gurjaani many times when I'm traveling around the wine region. It was really nice to stop and properly explore the town and the municipality in more detail. I really enjoyed my time here, especially the architecture and the different museums that are on offer. If you're interested in adding Gurjaani to your Kakheti or your Georgia itinerary, you can find my blog post with all these locations and other travel tips linked in the description below.